Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Superfeeler podcast. My name is Lori, and I'm joined today by Dave, Kat, and Shannon. This is part of our BPD symptoms mini-series, so borderline personality disorder symptoms, where we're going through all of the DSM criteria. Today, we're going to be talking about identity disturbance. And before we do that, let's just introduce ourselves so everybody can hear our voices and know where we're coming from. So my name is Lori. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm calling in from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I have been diagnosed with borderline for, I think, almost 13 years now, which is kind of crazy. So some of these symptoms come and go in my life and shift quite a bit. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with all of you. Maybe I'll go to Kat next.
Hey, I'm Kat. I'm over in Scotland, which is where I'm from. I have an EUPD and a CPTSD diagnosis. So extra spice.
Awesome. And EUPD is emotionally unstable personality disorder, which is like the European version of BPD, just for people that don't know what that acronym stands for. Awesome. Shannon.
So my name is Shannon. I am from Australia. Received my diagnosis 4 years ago, but that doesn't negate the fact that I'd been dealing with these symptoms for a long time before that. So great to get an answer. Yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into this one with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Shannon. Dave, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Dave, calling in from Miami, Florida. In my mid-40s, I got my borderline diagnosis a little over 3 years ago, and also a diagnosis of OCD as well. And since that time, I did 2 rounds of DBT, and I also went away for about 4 total months of inpatient DBT-based treatment last year. And since then, it's now been, before that, so up to about a year or so ago, I met all nine criteria consistently. And then since I got out of the inpatient treatment and after the 2 rounds of DBT, since then I have met exactly none of them on a daily or otherwise basis. So, which is not to say that anyone should feel bad or ashamed if you don't have the same results that I do, but also anyone who tells you that remission of BPD is not real and it's not possible should talk to me.
Yes, please. Everybody loves talking to Dave. Dave is our favorite. I was going to say favorite person, but that has weird connotations in the BPD world. So Dave is one of our favorite people. Actually, it was so funny. I was literally talking to some friends. I can't remember what the context was. And I just randomly was like, yeah, I just absolutely love the people that I'm doing these mini series with. It's like, I just texted Dave the other day telling him that I love him. And then my friend looks at Aaron and goes like, is that fucking weird? And Aaron's like, no. And I was like, okay, good. I was like, good. It never even occurred to me to wonder if that was weird. I just I don't know. I was like, Aaron doesn't know Dave, but feels like he probably does know Dave, so it doesn't matter. Awesome. Okay, cool. So let's get into this criteria. This one is interesting. So the official language in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, is identity disturbance, marked and persistently unstable self-image or sense of self. So who wants to start? Because I don't feel like this one necessarily is super relevant for me. Shannon, you look like you want to start.
Can I ask you a question first?
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully this isn't too off topic, but, I never even took an undergrad psych class. So I don't have any particular training in what the DSM is or anything like that. But recently I was reading something that I had never heard before. And I was just curious to get your thoughts on this, particularly as we're going through these criteria, that at least in this person's telling, one of the main purposes of the criteria is it's not necessarily understanding all the parameters of a particular mental health issue, but it's so that people who are studying it have a consistent set of criteria for developing a group of participants in a study. I just wanted to get your input on that.
That's interesting. I mean, it's used in that way for sure. And that's actually, interestingly, why dialectical behavior therapy became kind of the go-to treatment for BPD, which I just found out recently, is that Marcia wanted to do a study on chronically suicidal individuals. And they said, that's fine, but you have to have a diagnostic label for this study. And the closest diagnostic label to the group that you want to study is borderline. So super random. But anyways, it is used for that. But I think it's mostly it's called the Diagnostic Statistics Manual. I feel like in my experience, it's mostly used as a diagnostic tool in more clinical areas. I think both. I don't know. That's an interesting take.
And for insurance codes.
Yes, true.
It's the main sponsors.
Thanks. That's really helpful. Thanks.
And then even more interestingly is, like, for example, Kat said that they have emotionally unstable personality disorder. That's because Europe, only North America really uses the DSM. So they have another
International Classification of Disorders.
Yeah, ICD. What does it stand for?
International Classification.
I was like, I know this. I did a presentation. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so that's interesting too. And one of the things that I was actually going to ask you guys eventually is, when we're done all the DSM criteria, if we want to look at comparing the European model and the North American model to see how we think it's different. But that's a spoiler alert, because I haven't even had that conversation with you guys yet.
No, the new ICD is wanting to take out the personality disorder columns, I guess. Guys, no. Just have personality disorders on the assumption that if you meet the criteria for one, you'll meet the criteria for at least 3 on average. And interestingly, the clinical was, we still want to be able to say which ones have borderline traits, though. So that's the only one that's still there. It's like personality disorder or personality disorder with borderline traits.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And it's more, my understanding, and I haven't looked at it in detail, is it's more of a like scale there's a word for it. I just can't come up with it right now. More of a scale as opposed to a, like, yes, you have this, or no, you don't. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like a spectrum?
Spectrum, thank you. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Yes, spectrum. So Shannon, I think you wanted to say something about the identity disturbance piece and get us started there.
I remember when I first got my diagnosis, and I was the same as Dave. They said that I met all 9 criteria, and I thought they were insane. But I was the patient.
Yeah. Sometimes it's questionable.
Yeah, there was a couple of things in there that I was like, this is not me. And it took me kind of diving into it a little bit more. And funnily enough, especially with this symptom, I think it really took me a while to get my head around, because I thought, like, when they talked about abandonment, I was like, I am so independent. I don't have abandonment issues. I don't care. Completely wrong. And we did discuss that in the other episode, but especially with this one, kind of saw my lack of self-identity almost as a strength, because I could just fit in wherever I went, and it didn't matter who I was talking to. I could find something in common with them. But what I realized, and I could make them like me, like we could find common ground, and it was great. But what I realized as I started to learn more about myself and what this actually meant was that I was actually betraying my core values at times to fit in. And the deeper part of that was that's obviously ties into abandonment as well. But the deeper part of that was that I was showing up not as myself. So then what follows is this huge spiral of self-doubt of, do these people like me for me? Or if I stop doing the thing that makes me fit in with these people, is that going to stop them wanting to be my friend or wanting to be associated with me? And so I think it probably took me 2 years after my diagnosis to really get my head around this and realize what a big issue it actually was.
And I think it is a strength in a lot of ways, right? Because we're kind of chameleons, which is really helpful in a lot of contexts. And I've heard this in the work context, where I can speak to the CEO and I can speak to a client in the same day, and I can totally meet the need of whichever person I'm talking to and fit in with them as though I'm like working on their level, for lack of a better word. But I hear you around, who am I then? If you're always a chameleon, even if that's a strength, then do you have a sense of self?
Yeah. Every personality test I've ever done, like in management roles where they give you different things to see what type of leader you are, or within a community to see, where your skills best fit within that community. My number one strength every single time is adaptability.
Interesting. I find those personality tests so triggering in a work context. And what's so funny is this actually came up like literally on, like, we're recording this on a Sunday. It came up on like Thursday last week, where my boss had said, oh, let's do personality tests as like, you know, a bit of a like way to kind of bond and whatever. And I just didn't say anything because I hate them. And I feel I have weeped. Like, I have had full on breakdowns about having to do personality tests in the workplace, because when I hear personality tests, I hear your personality is already clinically flawed. Therefore, everybody's going to see it when you do a Myers-Briggs or a whatever it is. And so and I've had to do a number of them over the course of my career, and I hate it every single time. And I just kind of treat it as like, this is bullshit, whatever. I'm just going to do it. And like, I don't care. You know what I mean? Whereas like the first time I did it, I literally had a breakdown. And my boss had just said a couple of weeks ago, like, well, let's do a personality test for our team. It'll be like a good bonding experience. And I didn't say anything. And they all know I have a personality disorder. And then it came up on Thursday where somebody said something about personality tests being triggering. And somebody, I guess, had read this somewhere and said, I hadn't thought of the fact that personality tests would be triggering. And I said, yeah, they're like one of the most triggering things that ever happened to me in a workplace. And my boss messages me and goes, I am so sorry that I literally brought up last week or whatever that we were going to do personality tests. And I was like, yeah, no, I was super triggered. I was just going to like go with the flow and do it anyways. But if your personality is diagnostically flawed, then I know that that's not what they're getting at. And I know that that's kind of in my head, but totally. And I think I could probably, if I answered those tests in one context versus a different context, I'm sure my answers would be totally different. Yeah, adaptability is huge.
If I did one of those tests, depending on whether I was doing it in my workplace or say like, because my work compared to my podcasting, yeah. I'm two totally different people in both of those places. And then like in a community sense and the volunteer programs and stuff that I'm involved in, I would get a different outcome on that same test depending on which environment I was taking it in.
Totally. Which I find so fascinating, because my understanding of BPD when I was like first diagnosed with it is that these symptoms are supposed to be kind of pervasive across various contexts. Yet I'm so different across various contexts that I'm like, how does that make sense? You know? Anyways, I don't think any of us have the answer to that, but it's an interesting thought that I have often. Dave, what does this look like for you?
So I had to, when I knew this was the topic, I had to go back and do some thinking, because fortunately these things, they tend to fade. I mean, maybe that's also sort of a defense mechanism. It's like, it's, you know what I mean? It's the same thing that sort of kept me from thinking too hard about them before I got the diagnosis. Now that I don't really experience this anymore, I had to sort of go back and think. And it also, I mean, frankly, I think I had to like sort of go back and look and see where exactly the line was between this one and the one about chronic emptiness. Because I like where the one begins and the other ends. I'm real clear on that. So I think for me, once I started sort of thinking about this particular criteria, I could trace all the way back to grade school, where this was an issue where, I think in addition to like the more, like acting like other people who I wanted to like me in terms of like, wearing clothes, or, it got a little more specific than that. It was like mimicking the way that people talked, mimicking the way that people like walked, or like the way they held their body, or like moved around. I would like, if there was someone who seemed like everybody liked and was sort of the center of attention, if they had like distinctive characteristics, I would like adopt those. But it was also like, then it wasn't just like around those people. It's like I would then, even when they weren't around, I would like adopt those things with other people. I think, I guess under some sort of a belief that like it wasn't the person itself, that there was like something about the way they moved when they walked, or the way that they, like just like little gestures, that was like somehow that could draw attention and get people to accept me or like me. I think that, as time went on, it got more and more baked in, I think. And, I found that, I think at some point, I think I found that really things were just completely unrecognizable in terms of like what I was up to. When I was in college, I was sort of in the like Grateful Dead hippie kind of crowd. So, I had like really, really long hair and like hemp ropes in my hair with beads and all.
No, I need a photo of this for the record, just so you know. I need one.
I can supply that. But it was one of these things where I think that there was a lot of cognitive dissonance, and not that I recognized it. I think sometimes I did recognize it at the time, that it was like, it wasn't exactly me. And so it did create this distance with people. And that's sort of like a theme that I think carried from the beginning until till about a year ago, is that like I would adopt these different, whether it was an accent or, beads in my hair, or just like saying that I had certain beliefs or whatever it was, in order to sort of like get acceptance from people who seemed like people who it would be beneficial to me to be accepted by. But then it would get increasingly stressful to be around those people, because, to where it's like, it wouldn't take that long, and it would be an increasingly short amount of time where, then somebody would like invite me to go do something, and I would either like say, it would be really agonizing to accept, or eventually I'd wind up saying no, because it was like the chance that I would go, and like it would become clear that like I wasn't really like, that I didn't really belong as part of the group, because I didn't really believe these things, or also just that, sometimes I would like go to do things, and then I would I would already be looking for an excuse to get out the door. Right. So it's like, I could sort of like will myself to like go to the party. But as soon as I got there, I was like it was super stressful, and I was like looking for a way to get away, because I didn't feel like I fit in. So yeah, it was not particularly fun. I think, like you, I think that or what you were just saying, Shannon, I was extremely adaptable. I've been a lawyer for about 20 years, both in private practice and government practice, and particularly in private practice. I was at a big multinational firm in New York. We had thousands of lawyers worldwide, and the stereotypes are true. Like, a lot of the partners were very difficult people to work with, probably had their own personality disorders.
Yeah.
They were all on like their third marriages, like just like difficult people who would just ground through junior associates or trainees or whatever you'd call them. And I never had an issue with it. Like, I could just, and I didn't think of it as like stemming from something that was somehow harmful to me, but like, I got along with all those people and I think it's because I could just be, I could very, very, my brain just, without me even knowing about it, could figure out exactly what they wanted. And I could just like be that, and that's not a great way to go through life either. Again, it's increasingly stressful, because, you get more and more worried that, like, well, what about this time? Like, this time, am I gonna, and other things were causing issues too. Yeah, it's a difficult one. It's one of the more difficult ones to see. I mean, I think that, impulsive behavior, regardless of whether you're able to stop it, if you're getting drunk at 11 o'clock in the morning, or you're shoplifting compulsively or things like that, it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like, it's impulsive behavior, or, it's sort of like uncontrollable anger. It's like, yeah, like I'd scream at cars and crosswalks, and I like, scream at people in rental car agencies when they tell me that I can't have the car that I have a reservation for, and things like that. And this one is just, it's hard to see. I think that a couple years ago, like around the time that I started doing this, I read, it was like a series of books where this guy, not in a fictional sense, but he just took a super deep dive over like 6 volumes into his life and like all stages of it, and just sort of like getting it all out on the page. And like, he actually sort of like winds up destroying his family through the like disclosures in the books. And it's like this whole thing.
Wow.
But it was like, it really got me thinking about like all these beliefs I had about like who I was, what I liked, what I was into. And it was really like mind bending to be reading these books and then just have something occur to me and be like, oh, like, I view myself as someone who's like a rock climber, but I haven't done that in 25 years, like, I mean, and not all things that simple, but it's like I had all these sort of things
identities
that had nothing to do with me and nothing to do with what my life was really like. And they were just sort of carrying on and stressing me out day to day. And I just, one more thing, and then I'll be quiet for a while. But I think, so one of the great things that happened to me, and I was really, even when I was doing really well in DBT, I think that like this was something that was really hard to just handle in the middle of real life. And what really helped me for this, fortunately and unfortunately, it was going away for the 4 months that I was away, where I was somewhere that like nobody knew me and I didn't know anybody. So there was no stress around like I, if I act like this, these people are here who they've known me and they know that that's not really who I am. And so from the start of it, I could make this commitment of like, I'm just going to be me. Like, I'm not going to care about, I mean, it'd be great. Not that it was like, I'm not here to make friends kind of thing, but it was just like, I'm here to get better. And like, part of that is going to be, I'm just going to be me all the time. And I feel grateful that I had that sort of like training wheels couple months, because then when I came home, it was much easier to transition into just in any given situation. Like, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Do I actually like this person? Do I not like this person? So
can I jump in there and say it was the same for me, Dave? Going into hospital, into inpatient treatment was the most incredible thing. And I mean, I'm not sure about when you went in, but when I went in, I was really not okay. So everything was stripped back to bare bones. Like I was literally just trying to survive. And then going in there with people who, because I'll generally, like in the real world, I've got a fairly high pain tolerance. I can put up with a lot of crap. People can do whatever they want to me, really, and I'm generally okay unless they like mess with my kids or someone who I love. But I can pretty well just be whatever anyone needs me to be. And then you go into a place like hospital where all of that's stripped away. And then there's a whole team of professionals who can see through any bullshit. So like if you're trying to tell them you're okay, they know you're not.
Yeah. Ma'am, would you be here if you were okay?
That's right. So it was like I was forced to be who I was. And I had this team of professionals who were like, tell us about what this thing is like for you. And there was nothing at risk anymore. Like I had literally got to the point where I wanted to end my life and still wasn't convinced that that's not where I was. And they're like, okay, well, so there was no shame attached to it anymore. I'd done the worst thing that I thought you could possibly do. So then I could be really honest, because I think even prior to going into hospital, like even with my appointments with my psychologist, I wanted her to like me. And I think she really did. But there was just some stuff where she does. I still see her. But there would be things, possibly not on purpose, but that I would, leave out or wouldn't dive deep enough into because I was scared of what her reaction was going to be. So yeah, then I ended up in hospital. And it was this miraculous thing as I started to build relationships in there, because you do when you're in there for a period of time,
How long were you there for
people.
Again?
I did 5 weeks and then I came out and then I went back for another 5 weeks.
Right. Okay.
Probably with a couple of months in between. And so you start to build relationships, but it's the truest form of yourself that comes out. And exactly like you, Dave, I came out because all of my responsibilities were stripped back.
Mm-hmm.
Quit my job. Like I went into hospital, so I didn't go back to work. So nobody needed me there. The kids knew, my kids knew how bad things were. So my partner was taking care of all of their needs, so I could just take care of myself. All of the things in life and all of the people who needed me just all started taking care of themselves. And then I could just be who I didn't have to be a mum. I didn't have to be an employee. I didn't have to be a friend. I didn't have to be any of those labels that I put on myself. A rock climber. I am not a rock climber, Dave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hence the point. Yeah.
But once all of those labels are stripped back, then you've got to figure out who that person is that's just there underneath all of those things. And when I was in hospital, I really liked who I was. I cared deeply about the people who were there alongside of me. And I got so much encouragement and wisdom and knowledge from these people, which you think if you're going to go into a psychiatric facility, that was not what my picture was of what I thought it would look like. I was in there with the best people, and it helped me to be my best self. And I don't know if it's the age thing too. I was going to ask you guys about this, but after coming out of hospital, so I was 40, and I remember a lot of my friends saying, I always have this joke, oh, I want to be like you when I grow up. And like I'm 40 saying that to people who are, 50. And
sometimes I say that to people that are younger than me.
so
like, oh God, how is this going to work?
But to come out and then have that basis and go and then just keep building on that. Like this is, I don't think I knew what my core values were prior to any of this. So to build on that and then strip away the stuff that didn't matter. If I wanted to say no, I just said no. And I could do that because nobody's going to say, well, why can't you come to the girl who's just come out of a psychiatric facility? She just tried to kill herself. So, we're not going to put pressure on her. We're not going to force her to come to this thing. So I could just say no. I could just really focus on the things that really mattered. And I think that started to develop, like this self-identity started to develop. But I had a lot of friends who would say to me, oh, wait till you're 45. And then you just stop giving a shit about what anyone else thinks of you. And I used to think
for 30 too. I mean, I've throughout my whole late 20s, they're like, when you're hit 30, you don't care about what anybody thinks. And I'm like 31. I'm like, I don't care a ton about what other people think, but it's no direct difference than when I was 29. Like it doesn't change.
But then I say that too, Laurie. I say, I don't care about what people think. And then I come home and ruminate for 3 hours because I wonder what the hell they thought about that thing that I said. Like, I'll get off this podcast with you guys and drive to work today. And I'll be like, oh, do they think I'm a dickhead because I said that? Like, so I say I don't care about what people think. And I do care what you guys think of me because I love you guys and I want you to, not think I'm a dickhead. But when Dave was saying about, the dreadlocks and trying to fit in and all of those things, I don't think that's a BPD specific thing. I think that's a adolescence thing and you're finding out who you are. But if there's a whole pile of people in the world that say, oh, well, when you get to 30, you know who you are, or when you get to 50, you don't give a shit about what people think. Is this just harder for us because we have BPD and we feel so strongly about this? Or is this something that a lot of people go through? Like, I would really be interested in having this conversation with somebody who didn't have BPD.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like the imposter syndrome thing, if you think about that as a challenge with identity, which I think it is, every human I've ever met has that issue, and they all think that it's not the same because they're the ones who are actually the imposters. And you're like, no, we're literally all making it up as we go along. It's
amazing how parallel our experiences were. And hopefully the message that people don't get is if you want to get better, you got to go away to inpatient treatment and, because you're desperately suicidal. I think that, I think the difference is this, which is that for almost everybody, you go through your teens and maybe even your 20s to a lesser degree, and you're trying on different identities. You're trying to be like other people to fit in. Like, I think that's different in breadth and depth than what I experienced. And it sounds like what you experienced, which is, number one, it starts and then it just never stops. for years and years and years, and which is also is the difference between people who say, "Oh, I have imposter syndrome," and you're like, "Well, tell me, what does that mean?" And it's like, "Oh, I just I just got drafted by the Yankees, and I'm like, I feel like I don't belong," and then it's like, or whenever they have it, it's like there was a story about Misty Copeland, who's like one of the principal dancers for the American Ballet Theater. And she's like, "Oh, I had, when I first came, I had imposter syndrome," and it's like, yeah, like I don't find that terribly like applicable to my life, that you were this like world-class ballerina when you first got there, you felt like you didn't fit in. But I mean, I think it's also like, for me, it wasn't like it was a constant sort of trading, right? So it was like starting from the time I was in grade school until at least until like my mid 30s or early 40s, it was a constant movement, right? To like, I would be with like one friends, and then I would start to feel uncomfortable with them. So then I would see a different group of people and be like, well, problems will be solved if I'm in that group. So then I act like them, and then that wouldn't work, and I would trade to a different one. Like, I don't think that's an experience that that people without BPD, or at least like people without some sort of like more serious emotional disturbance, have, where it's like that constant churn of like, okay, now this isn't working, I got to go do this and be with different people and probably completely push these other people out of my life so that I don't have to be reminded about the fact that like now I'm doing this other whole thing and they're going to look at me and be like, wait, like I thought you had beads and stuff in your hair and now you're like a corporate lawyer, like that's weird. I think that's a big difference. I think it's interesting what you said about, because our experiences is amazing how parallel they are, where I went in for 5 weeks or so, and then I came out briefly, and I was in the hospital for a week, and then I went into a different place for a month and a half. And when I was in the hospital, I was I was as scraped clean as I think a human could possibly be. There was so little there that it's like, but I remember I distinctly had this belief that like, if I tried to look even a minute into the future, into like what it would look like, I couldn't picture it. It was just like completely blank, completely black. There was just nothing. And that experience of starting over from zero, but particularly, and I think I've been pretty open about the fact that a lot of my crisis that I went through had to do with having been in a long-term, very emotionally abusive relationship, where in particular the person was really abusive to me around my efforts to finally deal with my mental health, who was someone who was actively working to try to destroy my relationship with my DBT therapist, somebody who when I told her that I had OCD issues and described them, then would like lean into it. And I mean, without giving a specific example, it would be almost like if someone told their partner, I have OCD, and it means that like, I'm constantly so worried that I'm going to get AIDS that like I have to like wear gloves everywhere I go and all this stuff. And if your partner then in the context of a fight was like, I don't know, like I think somebody with AIDS was over here earlier today and like touched all the doorknobs. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that, where it was like, Jesus Christ, And so
Yeah.
and so again, like not to say that you have to be in an abusive relationship to handle this, but my guess is that like if you, just from my own experience, if you go to, I suspect there aren't many people with BPD who don't have someone in their life, particularly a parent, who is just not nice to them, who's like not good, who puts their finger constantly in like those
Like
those
poking the
wounds.
bear almost.
And I think that absolutely, to some degree it was the being scraped clean, but then it was also being scraped clean and then winding up in an environment where this person who was doing this to me could not have been more gone. Like wasn't around. I wasn't in touch. I didn't need to be in touch. Like they couldn't get to me. And I could just spend then like a month and a half rebuilding from absolute ground zero without having this person in my life who was doing that to me. And I'm grateful for that.
Now I want to go to treatment again. I'm just kidding. Kat, what does this look and feel like for you?
I think this is where it crashes right into the dissociative CPTSD to the point of plurality. So I've always been someone that picks up other people's accents or mannerisms or whatever, stuff like that. And then, so just that kind of chameleoning, but never quite getting it right. Like it always slightly offbeat with what everyone else actually liked or wanted. Like I so many conversations that I would just, every time I was honest, and there'd be like a little drip of like some of the madness that went on in my childhood, and it would just stop the conversation and everyone would just be silent, and then somebody would change the subject, and like it made me feel so wrong and worthless and useless and just othered and all of that. Yeah, it's that feeling of being in like a glass ball and just running into the glass, like just face first repeatedly. So that was kind of my experience of being around people. I definitely had, like when I was I was a very feral child, and like when I was out in the wilds and like just wandering and like swimming in lochs and stuff like that, like that was who I am. And like when I'm out in nature now or with horses or like hanging out with my dogs, that's who I am. And that's kind of consistent, but other things are not. So like I've always been someone whose accent changed, but then when enough people picked up on it, I can track it. So it's like if I feel like I'm being judged, I will be very, very formal and very, very correct English. Whereas if I'm comfortable, I sound like this. But yeah, and that does match to those kind of dissociative parts and their perspectives. So it shows up a lot. And like as I'm kind of doing a lot of therapy and exploring that more, I'm getting more kind of memories and trauma memories and other memories and like other kind of awarenesses, which is kind of filling out things and making things make sense. Yeah, so it's kind of unstable, but it's getting more stable but compartmentalized, if that makes sense.
Totally. What I find so interesting is Dave and Kat, you both brought up the accent thing and how you kind of take on the words and vernacular of the people around you. I do that so much. So when I say I don't find that this one is super relevant to me, and then you both say something like that, and I go, "Oh my god!" And it's so bad. One of the guys on my team is younger than me, and I've always been kind of the youngest person on all my teams at work, and now I'm I guess not that young anymore. So now there's people younger than me, and so they talk in all sorts of, I don't even know, like youth slang, let's call it. And I went to my friend's house for the weekend, like for, I don't even know, like Thanksgiving or something. And they were like, "Lori, why are you talking like that?" And I was like, what do you mean? What am I talking like? And they're like, you sound ridiculous. Like you're not 20. Why are you talking like that? And I was like, I don't know what you're saying. And I then realized like, oh my God, I spend 40 hours a week with a guy who spends a lot of time online and is younger than me. And so just I've picked up what he says. And it was hilarious to be called out so bluntly. And I've always noticed this because I have a decent amount of family in the States. And I've always found that when I go to the States for more than 24 hours, I come back with a bit of an American accent. And I can usually flip it. And it's funny because I'm actually horrible at accents. Like I couldn't do it on purpose to save my life, any accent. If I spend enough time in the States, I come back and I start catching myself using like Americanisms and American accents a little bit more, which it seems so harmless, right? I mean, that of all things, that's like, who cares? It's kind of funny when your friends call you out for sounding 10 years younger than you actually are. But I find this whole conversation, and not because of you guys, I just feel like a hypocrite, you know? Because I care so much about authenticity. And I try really hard to live by authenticity. But then we have conversations like this and I go, who is authentic, Lori? Because I think it's this one, but is it? And then I start to spiral of this whole like self-doubt. Is your reality the real reality? All of that. And I mean, I do think that this is my real self. And I think that like the person in the Super Feelers Club is my real self. But yeah, you know what I mean? Where I just start to question, am I my real self? Or am I just blending into the people around me? And I've only selected people around me that make me feel like I am the self I want to be, which is amazing. And I'm so glad to have you guys. And I'm glad that you guys are the self I want to be.
I think that, and I'm glad you brought that up because, even before I went away to inpatient, I had sort of made it, one of the things that was giving me a lot of progress was I had made a real commitment to sort of like radical authenticity. And I think that what I came up with was, it was when I was in a situation and I started to feel uncomfortable or nervous. There was like almost a physical feeling. It was like I like willed myself then to think about like, am I doing something or saying something that, not because of me, but because of what I think someone else wants to hear or see. And then I specifically opposite actioned it and like specifically didn't do that thing. So it's not that I had to like speak my truth to like everybody all the time. I just, at the very least, it's like, I mean, it's, if I was feeling comfortable, maybe this is your answer, right? Which is that I suspect when you're leading super feelers at this point, you don't think too hard about like what people are thinking about you. You're not feeling nervous or hoping it ends. And I think that's a sign that you are being authentic. I think that people who feel great when they're being inauthentic, they're like, those are your sociopaths. You know what I mean? Like those are your people who are not, they have other issues. And I suspect people with BPD, we feel the worst.
True.
When even if we can't recognize it, even if there's a block there, it's a sign that we're doing something that is against our values, or we're doing something, the only reason is because we think someone else will only like us if we do something that's acceptable to them. So I would just suggest that to someone else to take that as a sign to just step back, look at what you're up to, and just check in and say, does this, what I'm saying or doing, does this align with my values, or am I doing this for somebody else?
Yeah. No, that's so insightful, Dave. And I think the values piece is really important. And like we talked about this on the DBT skills series, right? Of trying to figure out your values and where they come from, because that where they come from is also super important.
I think it's worth mentioning too, or at least looking at, a lot of us who have BPD have some kind of significant trauma in our lives, and the messaging that comes with that, especially in early childhood, if you have unstable relationships with parental figures, or if there's abuse, or, there's a myriad of things. I don't need to list them. We know what they are. But the messaging that comes with that, and who we are, specifically for me, I'll use myself as an example. I'm bad. I deserve it. This happened to you because of this thing, because of what you did here. And it would be different examples all the time. When that messaging gets built into your psyche during those formative years, that is I think we need to acknowledge what it takes for people who experience that, not only just to make it, but to get here to have this type of conversation, because we are untangling a web that we didn't weave. And it might not be childhood stuff. It might be dysfunctional marriage, or, you have toxic people around you that filter this stuff in. And it's not an easy thing to unravel. And it's one thing to sit here and talk about our flaws and like these things that we struggle with and why it's hard for us. But I think it's definitely worth acknowledging the ways that a lot of us got here.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fact that we're sitting here and we're talking about our values and the kinds of people that we want to be around, the fact that we're building communities of people around us that lift us up and support us, and we in turn do the same for them. Bloody go us. Like, this is big, tough stuff. And those horrible, horrible humans who dumped their shit in our bucket and expected us to carry it, well, fuck the lot of you, because here we are and we're doing it and we're having these conversations so other people who are carrying buckets of shit that somebody else dumped on them can maybe understand who they are one day too. This is who we are. We are people here having a conversation in the hope that we can help other people. And I just want to say, yay us.
Yay us.
Hear, hear.
I love that, Shannon. Is there anything that anybody hasn't said about this symptom before we wrap up? And just as a heads up, I will end with asking what skills you use to try and deal with this unstable self-image. So that's a tip for a couple minutes from now. But is there anything that people haven't talked about that they really wanted to get into?
I do have an accent story.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Dave.
So when I was between the summer before my last year of college, I was about to say junior year, but then I realized everyone would ask, "Wait a second, what does that mean again?"
Literally, truly.
Right. Yeah,
you're the only American, Dave.
I know exactly, but I'm just so used to it. It's like everybody. USA is we're just better than everybody else, and we do everything right all the time.
You certainly think that way. not you, obviously.
That's me. That's my personal brand. It's just USA. But no. So I studied abroad the summer before my last year of college in England, and a couple weeks in, it's like it sort of came up that I grew up in Ohio in the middle of the United States, and people were like very confused because I guess I wasn't really aware of it, but I had like adopted this, like, again, not like a full on English accent, but the sort of accent that someone would have if like they grew up in England. And then when they were pretty young, they moved to the United States. Or, I mean, I guess like not quite as light as like when Gwyneth Paltrow and Madonna moved to England, but like, on that order where you're like, you're not from it. Where are you from? That sort of thing. And I mean, it was very embarrassing, but that was something that when I started looking into the BPD thing and they were talking about chameleons and stuff, it always reminds me of that, where here I'd taken on this like light foreign accent to the point where, I mean, people were kind of blown away.
You probably had no idea that you had done this.
No.
Yeah, it's wild. Kat, I think you had something you wanted to add.
No, it was just to call back to the reality piece that I think you were talking about. And like, I remember it from being very small, like having inside reality and outside reality, which is how I used to think about it. Still kind of true. And that idea of like, there's me, and then there's outside me, but everybody only sees outside me. So who's real? And that whole ride, and like the last kind of couple of years, I went down into that spiral again because of like new memories and plurality and all that. But just, and like Shannon was saying, that idea that you exist to be what the other person wants you to be. And for me, that does come from very early, and was then massively reinforced like throughout abusive bullying, abusive relationships, like all of it, various sexual violence. But like, yeah, it's hard. It's hard kind of unpicking that and deciding to just exist. Like it's radical. It shouldn't be, but it feels radical to just be like, no, you know what? I'm just going to exist and see how it goes. And sometimes it goes like, sometimes I don't want to be here, but like sometimes it's great. So it's worth it. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. So when we think about skills that you use, I mean, and it's funny because this conversation has been quite like dialectic, honestly, around the like positives and negatives. So it's not that we want to get rid of the fact that we have this adaptability. But when you think about skills that you use when you are maybe distressed about your unstable self-image, what do you go to? And Kat, maybe I'll start with you.
A values list, my who I matter to and why list, because that is like, this is who loves me and this is the person that they see, and that's real. Like if I'm worrying about all of the things that my head says, like being evil and useless and all of that, and then also check the facts on all of those beliefs. Tip: walking. I walk constantly. I phone helplines and just talk to them. And then usually they'll be like, I think you're awesome. And I'm like, really? But why? And they're like, well, because of everything that you've said. And I'm like, okay. And then I think the neurodivergent community has been really helpful as well. So like I have friends now who, I've got a friend and we were away before Christmas last year. And we were sat in a restaurant. We'd driven all the way in the car, and then we were staying for a couple of days, and we were sat, and she said something, and she was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I said that the way that you would say it." And I'm like, "No, it's fine. I don't mind." And I think it's just like building that community where it's okay. Like it's actually nice. Like if you're kind of being close enough that that's happening, it's nice. Yeah. And then I guess just checking in as well, that I am very grounded in me, because I have had those sorts of relationships where all of me is folded up in a corner, and what's left is just focused on that other person and trying to think what they want and how they're thinking and how I can avoid triggering them. Yeah, just remembering that I'm not doing that anymore. I have a kitchen full of affirmations all over like my cupboards, so yeah, that helps.
I want a picture of those too, Kat, just for the record, because I know that you've talked a lot about not only that list of what you mean to people. You even talked about that in the last episode we just recorded, and those affirmations everywhere. I know they've been like so impactful to you. Awesome. How about Dave? What about you? Skills that you find beneficial in this situation?
I mean, Kat, you really covered it. I thought that was, man, what such great thoughts. The only one that I would add is again, and I forget what it's technically called, but it's like the awareness of current emotions or something like that. There's all those like flow charts where you're like noticing your emotion, and then you're sort of like building back to what caused it, and like the secondary, those things. And then also where it's those exercises where you're like picturing your thoughts like a leaf or like a train pulling into the station, like some of those things where you're just tapping into like, what exactly is it that I'm feeling right now? And like, what does it mean for my weekend? And then in those cases where it's not coming from you, like I said earlier, using opposite action, but and being kind to yourself and being gentle, especially when thinking about maybe things that I've done in the past that weren't me, and that, where I've tried to fit in with other people, just being kind to myself about that.
What is that called, though? That thing that you were just talking about? It's something in behavioral chain analysis?
Yeah, right. So
is that what it's called?
That's the flow chart. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
I was like, just my brain, when there's a word and you're just like, I know this word. But yeah, totally. That makes sense. Those are good ones. Shannon, how about you?
I would say I'm pretty good at observing it now when it happens. Like when I get into that, my dickhead, do they hate me? Are they all talking about what I just talked about there? Like, are they all thinking, oh, she's an idiot, we don't want to do that with her anymore? So observe it, fact check it. I'm pretty good at then being able to take that fact checking into wise mind and reminding myself that actually 9 times out of 10, no one is thinking about you after you walk out the room. You're not that important.
Yeah.
And that tends to help that spiral side of stuff. But I guess the nature is the huge thing for me. We did a whole episode on how being in nature is my safe space where I feel most myself, even if there is leeches.
Yeah, fuck the leeches, but I will link that episode below.
So yeah, that is where like I can really kind of ground myself and check in. And when I'm there and I'm surrounded by the natural world, which I care about, and I like myself. I like who I am. And look, I still get things wrong, but sometimes I have to just go away from all the people who need me in a way that doesn't put me into hospital. So a forest will do that, and just be there and exist as me without all of the labels that I have attached to me. I'm not a podcaster. I'm not an employee. I am not a mum. I'm not a partner. I'm not a friend. I'm not anything else. I'm just a girl who exists in this world, and all of these little things are there existing alongside of me, and then I can come back out into the world, into the human ecosystem, and then maybe do some of the jobs that I need to do a bit more effectively after I've had that capability to tap out and remember who it is under all of the onion layers that I wear every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so well said. I feel like I don't have any like real tangible skills that I use for this, to be honest, which is maybe a me problem. It's almost certainly a me problem. I would say the only like thing that I try really hard to do, and maybe this is wise mind in some ways, is to just be really aware of when I'm taking on other people's identities. Yeah, so I guess in some ways that is wise mind, but it's less so about like the rational and emotional. It's more about the reality. Maybe that's check the facts. I don't know. Just trying to be hyper aware of, hey, you're sinking into this, like, I am now this person, or I am now this group of people, or I am now this hobby, or this whatever it is. And not always trying to like stop it in its tracks, because again, it's not always a bad thing, but just notice that that's happening so that I don't fall so far into this thing that I lose who I am as a person. Okay, well, this was fun. Thanks so much, you guys. That was unstable sense of self, which is quite an interesting topic. Thank you so much for listening to the Superfeeler podcast. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you'd like to learn more about the Superfeeler podcast, share your story, or participate in the Superfeelers Club, which is our peer support group, it's totally free, virtual, and open to anyone who experiences intense emotions or has borderline personality disorder, please check out the link in our show notes or go to laurieedmondson.com. If you would like to support the show, we would very much appreciate it. There's an option to do monthly small donations at whatever denomination you'd like, and you get bonus content, extra resources, and extra connection to me throughout. That can be found on patreon.com/superfeeler, or again in the notes below. Thanks again, and have a great day.